Hi, and welcome back to Chase's Everything Shooting. Today's episode is Gun Safety Basics. Now in the title of the slide I put on there, it's for new shooters. But you know what? Of all the years I've been an NRA instructor, I've noticed that at basic pistol courses that I have people in there that are, they're older and they've been shooting for many, many years, and some of their safety has kind of gone to the side and it's not as prevalent in their gun handling. So hopefully this will be a good refresher for everyone. So let's get to it. The top 5 things that are related to gun safety are gun safety rules. Number 1, always treat every firearm as if it were loaded. Super important, very, very good rule. Number 2, never point a gun at anything you're not willing to destroy. Another great rule. Number 3, always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. That's something that I've really noticed with some people that have been shooting a long period of time. They kind of get lax on that one. Number 4, always be sure of your target and what's behind it, okay? Another good idea. And number 5, never drink alcohol or do drugs when you're shooting or handling your firearm. Super important ideas here. So let's get to the number 1. Always treat your firearm as if it were loaded. You know what? That's something that happens quite frequently. People go, I didn't realize my gun was loaded. Well, that's your responsibility, is to always think that it's loaded and be prepared for that. I have a very good friend that's been a hunter for 40 years, and we've shot together. I haven't hunted with him, but we've shot together and done different things. And, he called me one day and he says, "Will, I had a negligent discharge." "You what?" He goes, "Yeah, I had a negligent discharge. I was cleaning my shotgun and I was in the kitchen and my wife called me to the back to help her with something. And I came back and he said, every time I clean my shotgun, I do the same thing. Every time. It's a routine. And he goes, well, you know what? I went through and pulled the trigger, and sure enough, there was a shell, and it exited the shotgun and went through the wall and the ceiling in my home." And he goes, "Man, I've never, ever felt this bad." So I totally get it. Even the best get tricked and they get lackadaisical, and something happens and takes their concentration away from what they're doing. So again, that's another one of those really important things. Now coming up, there's a video that I want to show you that is the guy shooting thinks his gun has been unloaded and it goes off. So watch this little. Welcome back. I hope you had enjoyed that video. It's a scary video. You see him shoot the first target. You see him shoot the second target. You see him and hear him pull the trigger, and for the third target, nothing happens. And he racks his shotgun and then pulls the trigger again and nothing happens. And so he racks it again, and then he puts his shotgun down and he looks down the barrel. And he had what was called a hang fire, and it went off. And he was very, very lucky. That could have killed him. It blew his hat off, and he had a few little scars on his forehead, but that's a scary, scary thought. So again, those firearms are always loaded. Now, we know in America that the gun rights activists are always talking about, how many shootings there are and what's going on. Well, with this unloaded gun thing, there's a category that's called unintentional shootings. And in America, we have on average about 27,000 unintended shootings a year, meaning really the gun was unloaded, or they thought it was unloaded, or I really didn't think I pulled the trigger. That's, of course, we know where that came from, one of those actors. But out of that, 493 of those unintended shootings become deaths. So we as gun owners and gun handlers and shooters, we need to make sure that we're doing the best we can to safeguard ourselves and anyone around us. Okay, enough for rule number 1. Let's get to rule number 2. Never point a gun at anything you're not willing to destroy. That's a super important thing. And, again, I've seen it at the range many times. People will shoot, and they'll run out of ammunition, and they'll be walking back to load their firearm again, and they're just muzzle waving everybody in the crowd and anyone that's standing around. You can't do that. You need to be thinking about where that muzzle is at all times. And even if you think your firearm's unloaded, we know by rule number 1, you should be thinking it's always loaded. So you never want to wave that muzzle by anything that you don't want to destroy. And I mean destroy. Kill whatever you want to use. But it's a super important thing, and you need to be thinking about that at all times. I try to train people that when you're at the range and you're going back to reload, is you bring back the gun with your chamber open and pointed down at the ground. Now, a lot of people will go, well, it should be pointing up. I'm not a fan of pointing the firearm up unless it's a rifle, only because with the pistol, pointing it up, it's up by your head. And so I really like to see it facing down. That's my personal preference. There'll be a lot of people probably commented, well, no, I've never done da. I agree. There's lots of different trains of thought to this, but always keep the muzzle pointed in a direction that you don't want to destroy anything. Okay, so now let's get to number 3. Always keep your finger off the trigger until you're ready to fire. That is one in my basic pistol courses that I see broken all the time. People will stand there and they'll sight the gun in and their fingers on the trigger the whole time. To sight your gun and to sight it in and to get where you're going to shoot, you don't need your finger on the trigger. When you're ready to shoot, you should be putting your finger on the trigger. But you should not be putting your finger, whatever that is. You should never be putting your finger on that trigger until you're ready to fire. And you know what? That's not a big thing. You lay it on a pistol, you lay it up on the side of your pistol. On a shotgun, on a rifle, you do the same thing. You leave it outside the guard. So it's not that hard to do, but it seems to be one of those things that gets forgotten, and it gets forgotten multiple times. Okay, so now we're going to go to number 4. Always be sure of your target and what's behind it. Now this, to me, is probably one of the most important things that is out there in gun safety. Now, of course, your being loaded, your firearm being loaded, your finger off the trigger, they're all super important. But when you're going to shoot, you need to know where your target is and what is behind it. And let's kind of go over that. You know, when I was taught to shoot, my grandfather actually taught me to shoot. And we were out and we were in the Texas Panhandle, and he goes, let's go shooting, and he grabs me, and we were out on this dirt road, and we're heading out to a friend of his ranch out there to shoot. And my grandfather says, hey, get out right here and I'll be right back. And so I'm kind of, oh, okay. So I get out of the car and he drives off. And I'm thinking to myself, what the heck are you doing? Well, he drives and drives and drives down this dirt road till I barely see the back end of the car. And I see him, and I'm squinting, I see him get out, and he waves his hands. And I'm like going, well, am I supposed to run up there? Am I supposed to run a mile with my gun? What are we thinking? Well, I just kind of stand there as I'm comprehending it, and I see him turn the car around, and he's driving back. And he pulls up, and he says, hey, get in the car. And I said, okay, well, what's up? And he says, did you see how far I was ahead of you? And I said, yeah, I saw that. It was a long ways. And he goes, well, that was a mile. And you're shooting a .22 rifle. That bullet will go from where you were standing all the way to where I stopped and I waved at you. So you need to know what's behind you when you're shooting your firearm. Wow, that really set a precedence in my mind. Wow, always know what's behind you. So important. So let's talk about this just a little bit. A .22 long rifle bullet will travel 1 mile in distance. That's out of a pistol, and it's out of a rifle. Wow, 1 mile. Now I've got a video that's coming up that will kind of give you an idea of that 1 mile mark. Welcome back. As you can see, that water tower, when we saw the water tower, when we got a mile back, it was a long distance. That bullet really travels. But let's talk about rifles here and the distances that bullets will travel. A 5.56/223 caliber bullet will travel 2.2 miles. A 30-06 will travel 2.8 miles, and a 308 will go 4.5 miles. That is a long distance. So you need to be thinking when you're shooting and what's behind that target and what caliber gun you're shooting is how far that bullet will go. Now, hopefully, you've got a berm behind it and that will stop the bullet. But here in Texas, if you're out shooting on the ranch, you may have a flat area for many, many miles. So something to think about. Now, for a pistol, well, let's talk about that. For a pistol difference, of course, the .22 long rifle will go 1 mile. A 9mm will go 2.5 miles. A 38 will go 1 mile. And a 45 will go 1 mile. Now you'll notice that the 38 and the 45, those are heavier, fatter, and they're not going to have the distance that the 9mm would. But something to think about again, if you're at the range, you're out on your farm, you're out on a public area, you need to think of what's behind that target and where that bullet's going to go. Now, for the very last thing, never drink alcohol or do drugs when handling or shooting your firearm. You know, gosh, I don't know how many times I've been out where guys, we've been hunting and people have gone out and hunted in the day and then come home, had a few drinks, and they decide, well, I'm going to go sight in my rifle, or I'm going to do this. Not a good idea. Not a good idea. You should never be impaired when you're handling your firearm. Never. And I know that people go, well, I've done it for years and I'm not fine. I don't drink that much. You know what? A little drinking or a little pot or a little drugs, it definitely makes a difference. And so do me a favor and everyone around you. If you want to go out and party, go out and party. But give, as the pilots do, 8 hours between the bottle and the throttle. So you need 8 hours between the time you've partied and the time you pick up your firearm. And sometimes that's not long enough. I'll tell you that. Sometimes it isn't. But these are important items to go by and live by. And I sure hope that you'll watch this and think ahead and really know all these 5 different items and keep them in the top of your mind when you're out handling and shooting your firearm. Subscribe and like. When you hit like, it helps my video get out to other people. So thank you for watching. My next video is going to be on the primer market and what's going on with the primers. Thanks, and thanks for stopping by.